Tom, helped the creation of the understanding of the clicks and clacks, you understand. From that evolved development of sound wave and together with implementation, the development of music, the attempt to imitate the sound of reed plant, rubbing together, imitation of wind through trees. John, this is what you once described as a tonal language. Tom, that is correct. That is the tonal language of the universe? However, in the dissension, then the babble came. Everyone was babbling like non-humans. That culture moved across planes and pockets, segments of groups, moved forward. It was again necessary for reseeding. You understand that when there is separation of people, there is also loss of knowledge. If there is not a group to repeat the knowledge, it is lost. When not utilized, it is not forthcoming in the brain. Therefore it was necessary for regenetics, yes. Guest, was this done with new people who came to planet Earth? Tom, from the same civilizations. Before Abraham there was one who taught the people, said to be from the sea. John, loans. Tom, yes. Except he was not from the sea. John, who was he in terms of the civilizations? Tom, he was from the civilization of Altia. John, I thought so. Just on that point, the leader of Altia was the mythological character Atlas, that is correct. Tom, that is so. John, at one time I think you said Atlas and Zeus were one and the same person. Tom, you understand how mythology has confusion. For you see, they say that Zeus made mating with a swan. The swan came from the heavens. Do you understand the complexity? Guest, yes. Tom, primitive man had assumptions. Council has said I have not answered. That holds up the world was Altia, yes. John, but I asked if that was the same as Zeus. Tom, humans created that mythical godhead. They gave characters to civilizations to make them gods, when they were not. Zeus with the swan was. The swan was a ship. When Zeus went into the ship, they called him a god, for it was their mountain, you understand. John, I don't know what you mean by their mountain. Tom, the ship came to their mountain. Guest, Mount Olympus. Tom, the corruption is Zeus. Atlas became Zeus. But Altia was the one. Guest. May I go back to Akesu? Was it a large number of beings who came to Earth to found the Akesu culture, or just a small number? Tom, in the beginning it was a small number, and then it was understood that more were necessary for seeding. Guest, did it take a long time before the dissension started, and how did it begin? What sort of issues were involved? Tom, there were not connections as they moved into outlying areas, and confusion reigned, and they became involved in what you would call local developments, and at times merged with the peoples of those areas. Therefore there was loss of memory and reverting back to a more basic state. Therefore it was necessary to re-enhance the genetics. Is that sense? Guest, yes. Did it take a long time between the first arrival and the separation, the dissension? Tom, migration would be a better term. Humankind and particularly those humankind of genetic exploration had curiosity, and always there is one that is curious in humankind, is that not so? So within 1 century there was moving out, and the necessity of re-enhancing was within 500 of your centuries. We speak not of those who remained. We speak of those who spread around in other places, yes. John, as I understand it, you talked about the hawk being there for about 1,000 years, and the others who followed him for about 4,000 years. Tom, that is correct. Were they not geneticists? There were the people moving outward. John, now, Phyllis had a dream the other day, and she felt that she was in Akesu, and she saw a sort of celebration and 3 different groups going in different directions. This dispersing, was it in about 3200 OBC? Tom, yes. John, now, I made an assumption that a civilization took responsibility for each of those groups. Is that so? Tom, yes it is, as you would say, sound. John, well, I imagine this was Ashan, Altia and Huva. Is that correct? Tom, that is absolutely correct. John, yes. Now I'm trying to determine which ones went in which direction. The ones that went to China, were they of Huva? Tom, they were of Ashan in combination with Huva. John, I see, they mixed before they went. Tom, there were those that were mixed, and those that were colonists from other planets. In Akesu, there were those that were of pure strain, those who were a mixture of one civilization with people of Earth, and there were those who were mixed strain, mixed again with those of another civilization. Do you understand this? How may we explain? We will use your solar system as an example. If there was from another planet, we will say, how may we explain? Suppose that you had a colonization of, say from your planet Venus to your planet Earth, then it was mixed with that of Ashon, that would be one strain, then if that of Ashon that was mixed with Venus then mingled with Huva, that would be of a second strain, is that not so? John, yes. So they also traveled overland, when they split up from Akesu, is that correct? Tom, yes. John, could we place the 3 occasions of the seeding? As I understand it, the first time was many, many thousands of years ago. The second time was at the time of the garden, the time of the Tarim Basin, and then the third time was at the time of Abraham. Is that correct? Tom, that is correct. John, yes, so the first seeding came with the arrival of the hawk. Tom, that is also correct. A second one arrived after a millennium. John, 1,000 years after the hawk. Tom, approximately. John, okay, now in relation to that, the groups of beings who were in the Tarim Basin, were they purely evolved or had they mixed with some of the other seedings that had also taken place? Tom, that is correct. They were of Huva. John, they were purely of the Huvid, so they hadn't nomadically met with any of the other groups that were also seeded, as I understand it. Tom, that is correct. John, and Altia was one of the other civilizations that had seeded, is that correct? Tom, that is correct. John, you once mentioned the small people and I never understood what that meant. Was that referring to the people who were seeded by Huva, were they smaller? Tom, we speak that humankind, when they landed, were smaller. Those who came were giants compared to those that existed on planet Earth. Andrew, going back to those early periods of mingling and hybridization, we understand from our science on Earth that a major phase of the ice ages ended around the time of the original landing of 32,400. What can you tell us about that? Was it actually ending or was it still in existence? Tom, it was already over. Andrew, was Akesu at that time a fertile green area, not desert? Tom, it had not become sprung, but it was warming. Andrew, the area was still cool, relatively. Tom, that is truth. It was not lush, but browns and reds. John, I'd like to ask about what we know as the Adam and Eve story. We discussed this and came to a consensus, that first a space being called the hawk came to prepare, then another came with a mandate not to engage in physical intercourse with the females here, until the time was right. The temptation then came, is this correct? Tom, the first being came to give knowledge to the natives that existed upon earth, about plants and animals. Then the second space being came, and he had great sadness for he saw the mating of the natives and the animals of planet earth. His sadness was not for the mating but for not having a companion to communicate with. So then one was given to him to communicate with. At that time it was asked that he not become involved in the ways of the planet Earth, for at the level to which he was evolved, it would have been disastrous for him to become involved in physical mating without adapting, without his body adjusting to a new equilibrium. So he was asked to refrain from this, to adapt him to pressures within his body, and for him to understand the functions that would come within his body, and also, as an example to those that existed, so that mating would be utilized only for the highest purpose. Then the one that fell came upon him and his woman companion, and placed within him a sense of the true knowledge which gave him the desire to be equal to God. The tragedy of this is that he originally came from the Creator and forgot this. So there was no need to attempt to be equal to God. But while on earth he found the need for this. John, I would just like to understand about the one that fell in this context. Tom, it was the archangel of whom you know? We wish not to use the name. In your Adam and Eve story he was the serpent. You see, it was never meant to be of two sides. It was all meant to be an equality. John, do you mean the male and female or negative and positive? Tom, negative and positive. Irene, when Adam and Eve chose not to understand the definition of obedience, which was part of the dialogue in paradise between you and them, and when they saw the truth of what obedience meant, and turned away from the responsibility of that, then humankind was set forth on a path where we had to define good and evil for ourselves in the context of bondage. Tom, that is correct. Irene, and the time before the fall is where the purity lies within humanity. It is on that purity that the transformation of the modern world will take place. Tom, that is correct. This modern world is the result of that contamination, and therefore transformation would be the result of non-contamination. Irene, yes. And that's why reality is changing in our modern times, and the process now is the piercing of that veil, because all reality does is continue to mirror where we were since the fall. Tom, that is correct. It is the illusion that you humans are equal or superior to the Creator and creation, and the reality you take to be real is illusion. Irene, so what is necessary now is the establishing of a philosophical construct of Eden, so that everything else will have its proper order. Tom, so it becomes a waterfall of purity. Irene, well, that's great. Israel, let's go do it. Tom, it will be. It is now in motion, but there are also those who will seek to disturb this. Know who you are, trust yourself, trust us, and know it will be done, and continuously view your motive in order to keep yourself in alignment with your highest purpose. And that is what is necessary upon planet Earth, for you know of the contamination on planet Earth, and the way that people may then attempt to misconstrue this forwardness and dawning of paradise. Irene, are you willing to say anything about the identity of Eve or her symbolic identity? Tom, we will not at this point. As you know, Eve became identified with the notion of original sin. And Eve, the feminine, was buried, and the male aspect consumed Earth. Because it was out of balance in its consumption, and because it wished for the punishment of the female, the male aspect felt that the female had brought disaster upon the Earth, when in truth the male never accepted responsibility for its own choosing. Now it is time for that responsibility to be taken. In those times, Adam and Eve had complete harmony and balance with nature. They had understanding of the rights of nature and of each issue within nature, and the communication with not only animals and flora, but also with rocks, soil, water and wind, and the moon and the sun and all. In the present day, the time of the female, the essence of Eve is coming to the fore, and what must be done is the complete merging of male and female. Not for the male to attempt to bind the female, and not for the female to attempt to suppress the male, but to work in complete joy and harmony and unity as two pillars that are holding up the world, separate but together. Yes. Steve, considering the question of balance of the positive and negative in Earth history, has there ever been a time when an excess of the positive has been the problem? Tom, yes. I should relate to you the time. There was such a state of positivity, when all the birds sang, and all the animals loved, and all the flowers bloomed, and that was during the period of Adam and Eve, the period of Akesu. That was a time of paradise, but also a time when the nature of the positive was out of balance. It was our error. Steve, so there had to be an introduction of the negative in order to promote further evolution. Tom, in a form of speaking, yes. We had not anticipated the results of desire. When humanity has no challenge for growth, then they can dissipate energy. Steve, how did the mythology of paradise and the Garden of Eden arise? Tom, Earth is the most beautiful of all that exist in the universe. It has variety that no other planet has. It has a varied climate that no other planet has. In truth, if the souls on Earth were of the highest evolution, it would be considered a paradise. This planet Earth may be a paradise when the density is removed. But when we say that, we speak of a paradise of creativity, a paradise that brings knowledge, a paradise that brings joy and love. A paradise in which humans may heal themselves or may experience, if they so wish, pain. But it is not a paradise where all challenge will be removed, all growth will be removed, all pain will be removed. It will be a paradise that humans can create, through their own evolution, their own understanding of their connection with the universe, and their accepting of responsibility for themselves, for their fellows, for planet Earth. All will be brought into perfection.